Karateka.
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 Karateka?
Karateka.
Karateka, karateka.
Karateka, and if it's karateka, I've never heard that before. So maybe Jordan says it that way, I don't know. But I know we all said karateka at the company.
I think when I was a kid, I always said karateka, because it's like you say karate and you just add the ka.
Let's talk about pronunciation. So here's the thing. In the 80s, TV didn't talk about games, and we didn't have the internet, so pretty much everybody pronounced the title of the game in their own way. A lot of people say karateka or karateka. In Japanese, there's no stress on any syllable, so it would be karateka, something like that. I called it karateka, but I've since found out that pretty much everybody pronounced it differently. So however you pronounce it is fine. Don't feel bad. It's all good.
I first saw the game while in the high school at the computer lab in 1984, while taking AP Computer Science in the 11th grade at Mount Carmel High School in San Diego. I think I saw someone else playing it and said, "Oh, that looks awesome." So then I started. There was a much bigger story element compared to typical arcade games at the time. The most difficult, frustrating part was at the end, trying to get past the princess, because every time I got close to the princess, I was knocked out. So it took me many tries to figure out what to do. The name Critical Wrath of Dude actually came from the Star Trek movie Wrath of Khan, and basically it was a story about how to get even with the princess that knocks me out at the end of the game. At about the same time, I was lucky enough to have my parents get an Apple IIe, and then later I got a software package called Take One, sprite animation kit. The project, the full animation itself took about 6 months in the first full version. At the beginning, I started doing some simple things, and then I noticed that it had a lot of potential, so I just redid the whole game in my image. What I've done originally was I made sort of a fast-moving slideshow from all the screen captures, and that was called Karateka the Motion Picture. Then later, after I got this Take One toolkit, I've edited all of my screenshots to cut the sprites up that I wanted. And then that was the beginning of Karateka 2, right? Using sprite animation instead of a slideshow. Most of the animations were done from the screenshots, but I made some of them myself. The more fancy animations like the rotating kits, the boomerang, and the rope, for example. In the opening scene, you might have seen sort of having like a temple with cherry trees. That's a background I made from trying to copy from an old calendar. I wasn't really inspired by fan work, but I did watch a lot of low-budget kung fu movies at the time. And there was also an arcade game called Double Dragon, which had some very brutal moves that gave me some inspiration. And the AP Computer Science in the 11th grade, I submitted that as a final assignment, even though it was supposed to be a programming assignment, but the instructor somehow didn't notice I wasn't doing any real programming. And then later, at a community college, I've submitted that as an assignment also, but instead of as a programming assignment, it was recorded with a video capture. Especially at the 11th grade, all of the classmates were just cracking up, especially after the awesome original version ending. However, my parents were not as impressed. People started asking for copies. However, in around 1993, I was studying undergraduate computer science at the University of Maryland, on the other side of the country. And an acquaintance there heard my full name was Eric Newman, and he was surprised that he couldn't believe he was talking to the guy that made Karateka 2. So the copies of copies went all the way across the country. And this was the guy, I think, used the copy and then later uploaded the disk image to the internet, which is the version most people see today. I'm just overwhelmed. It was just a small thing I did in the mid '80s. So I'm just flattered and overwhelmed. I never realized it was this popular.
So I met Jordan, it's probably like 1984, it must have been. So I had moved up from Southern California to Northern California. Doug Carlston, the CEO of Broderbund, invited me up. I think originally I was living at his house. And then I ended up, Jordan was visiting from college and I met him and we hit it off. We're very different, right? He's from just outside of New York City. His dad is this sort of, European intellectual. My family is very much Californian, so it was kind of this mixed thing. But he was, of course, fascinated with LA culture because he loved movies. And I had this sort of exotic blonde hair, tall, like volleyball player look. So it was kind of opposites attract. And then we ended up rooming together in San Rafael. And, we were kind of inseparable for a while. And he was, well into karateka. And we just became good friends, and then I was free, and then they needed a conversion, he just asked me to do it. So Karateka came out and did very well on the Apple II. And the conversions, so the Commodore 64 was kind of a hot computer at that point. And the Atari was a little bit older and maybe not quite as popular, but it still was a viable platform. And a conversion, particularly from Apple to the Commodore 64 and Atari, they had the same microprocessor, or roughly the same, but they ran the same code. And so the ports didn't take that long to do. So in some ways, it's a very satisfying, very quick thing to do, except then you had to deal with the new graphics and you had to make it work better for those platforms. I think the most difficult things about porting Karateka, one was Jordan was very exacting. So that probably would be, and because the game in some ways is very ambitious. So there's a lot of assets and you had to keep motion smooth a certain way and the interactions had to be very responsive. I think actually the Commodore 64 itself was a real chore because the Commodore 64 wasn't as refined, it was much more complex in terms of what it could do than an Apple II. And that had been the previously most complex computer I'd ever worked with. And it wasn't quite as refined as the Atari in terms of how the hardware would function. And so I found very often it would do things that were not totally predictable. And a lot of people had frustration with it. I think part of it is because the engineering of the Commodore 64 wasn't quite as good. So it was a frustrating platform to work on. And I think the reason why people worked on it is because it was so incredibly popular, because it was so cheap. It was a $100 computer that did an amazing amount of things. But that to me was the most challenging. So the Commodore 64 had only one button. So for punch and kick, which was on the Apple, you had two different buttons, so you could do punch and kick separately. On the Commodore 64, we had only one button. And I believe it was Jordan who came up with the idea of a short press to do a punch and a long press to do a kick. I kind of have that memory. And it seems like Jordan to come up with that. And ultimately would have to pass muster with Jordan anyway. You know, you're trying to fit, it's not exactly a square peg into a round hole, but there are certain design compromises. And very often you have to reinterpret intent. Fortunately, Jordan was around. But it's like if you translate a book into a different language, you don't do a literal translation. There are places where language will accommodate it. So you have to kind of reshape it through the sort of artistic intent. And this was one of those compromises. I remember the music in Karateka was very important, particularly because Jordan was very much into music and the cinematic quality of it. And his dad was as well. His dad composed the music, and his dad is actually quite an accomplished composer. And on the Apple II, it didn't have the audio capability. It was single voice, and you had to kind of simulate through square wave stuff, try to modulate it. But on the Commodore version, he made them much richer. And so the music was, I believe, largely, recomposed for the platform. I think the same theme that played at the beginning of the game was part of it, but he filled it out all over the place. And Jordan's father, Francis, went to town on it. He composed the whole thing himself. And so I'd get these bulk shipments of notes that I'd have to figure out. And there were more cues put into where the sound would happen. It was a challenge on the Commodore 64 because it ran slower we couldn't get the same fluidity as the Apple. We could actually do better than that on the Atari, and that just turns out because the Atari hardware worked a certain way. So the Atari 400-800 port came after the Commodore 64 port. It was a pleasure to use. It had the same one-button joystick problem. And its audio output wasn't quite as rich and interesting as the Commodore, but it was a faster processor. Now the Atari would steal DMA cycles to draw the screen, but because Karateka had a big blue sky, you would use these scanline interrupts to change the graphics mode. So like at the top of the screen, I would switch it to low-res graphics, which were basically like big text, and just set them to big blue blocks. And it would render that, and then when I got down to the fence, turn it off, and then it would go into high-res mode. And so what that did is probably ran at like 1.4 megahertz, so it's probably 40% faster, so it could be smoother. So in the Apple version, it would go fast and slow depending on how many things were rendering on the screen. But on the Atari, it was more likely to be at the right speed and feel more fluid, like as things were, like big objects were scrolling by. And in the dark rooms, in the later levels, you just turn off the entire graphic stuff, so it was particularly efficient. You didn't have to render anything up there, so it ran much closer, probably 1.6. And so the upshot was that it just felt better on the Atari. And I don't know, there's been many ports since. I remember seeing the IBM PC port of it, and it wasn't anywhere near as fluid. I did these conversions, and I was friends with Jordan at the very start of my career. I was a teenager at the time. And so in terms of how this fits into history, I feel a lot of pride in that this, I think, was a very significant work that changed the course of how people think about computer games. But also for me personally, it changed my relationship with Jordan, and how I think about crafting things changed dramatically as well.
A, cześć Adam. Ja wiem. Jakoś tak, ja tej gry tak, bo to jest wersja do Atari. Ja jakoś tak nie za bardzo przypominam sobie, żeby ona była aż tak szybka. Nie wiem, czy tu jest jakoś podkręcone, żeby emulator działał szybciej, że... No. Najlepsze jest to, że ci goście potrafią wyprowadzić cios z dupy. O, i trafił mnie nie wiadomo dlaczego. Nie, spoko. Ja po prostu nie gadam, jak nie mam do kogo. Jak ktoś coś powie, to się odzywam. Ja mu nic nie odbieram. Eee. No niesamowita jest ta gra po prostu. No, ja nie sięgnąłem, a on sięgnął. Z tej samej pozycji. No. Dobra. Ale na Atari jest o wiele, wiele szybsza niż ta, co przed chwilą sprawdzałem. Znaczy tą, co wczoraj na Apple II i dzisiaj na Commodore 64. Boże. No właśnie chyba nie. One są chyba tak jakoś równoważone. Ja nie wiem, jak one tam. Wysokie kopnięcie często moje nie wchodziło, ale jego wchodziło z tej samej pozycji. Poza tym w trakcie wysokiego kopnięcia drugie wysokie kopnięcie nie wejdzie, ale środkowe wejdzie. A znowu w trakcie środkowego nie wchodzą dolne. Jakoś tak. Nie wiem, bo nigdy nie sprawdzałem, nie zastanawiałem się nad tym. Po prostu tak jak teraz grałem, to takie rzeczy zauważyłem. A co to się stało tutaj to w końcu? Fajnie w dół poszło. A co ja tu przeoczyłem? A, wydanie na Commodora. Edward Badasow. Ale paskustwo. IBM. PC, PC XT, PC AT, PC Junior. Require a color graphics adapter card or Hercules. Sąsiad miał XT z Herkulesem. Chyba XT. Nie, na pewno XT. A tam miał brata kumpel. A potem drugi sąsiad miał 386, to już był wypas z VGA. Nigdy nie widziałem, żeby ktoś miał CGA i EGA. Z Herkulesa od razu na VGA przeskoczyłem. Atari 520 1040 ST, no tutaj to już mogło być ładniejsze. Ostatnia wersja karateki, tak? Spoko. Na ST mogli się pokusić jeszcze o ten, o wspinaczkę. Dodatkowy etap. The movement is too slow. Tak, tak, w każdej wersji. O, jakie ładne. Czarno-czerwone, super. Bardzo ładne, lubię czarno-białe ten, a tutaj jest fajnie tak podkreślone tymi czerwonymi wstawkami. Taki detal fajny. Color monitor required. Jedna dyskietka, fajnie. Fajnie, że na tych starych komputerach mieściło się 48 kilobajtach, a tutaj 512 trzeba. Pięć cali, 2 doda. High score, my score. Wow. A, to na NES-a. Famicom. O, na Game Boya. Ojoj. Ale kolory paskudne. O Boże. Na co to jest? Great deal of artistic license. Aha, podpisana. No to akurat spoko. Amstrad. O, tutaj jak widziałem też screeny z Amstrada, jak przeglądałem jakieś top secrety, to Amstrad zawsze miał najładniejszą grafikę z tych wszystkich 8-bitowców. Też nie kojarzę, co to jest. Też nie kojarzę. Zastanawiałem się też, ale nie wiem co to. Nic tu o tym nie napisali, nie? Może tutaj coś jest. Nie, napisali tylko, że japońska linia komputerów, ale to nie wiem co to jest. To do sprawdzenia. O, coś dłuższego się kroi.
Yeah, it was pretty hard. Started out, you got to master kind of the upper hit, the lower hit, and then the bird comes along and kills you, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. I have to get good at that. Have to get good at the timing, right? The way the game unfolded those sorts of vulnerabilities. And
Każdy ma jakieś mini arcade z tyłu na półeczce.
making a mistake was a big impact.
Well, that was the hardest thing to learn in the game. He just sends his eagle, hawk, falcon, whatever. Like we just knew it was trouble, and finally learning like the timing of how to like kick it in the air or something like that, and keep sending it back and just get it to go away.
Yes, yeah, I remember trying to time it. Well, it was difficult at first, but games back then, I was an arcade rat, so I was used to, you try something, it doesn't work, you die, you start over, you try again, try something different, and Karateka was, more of that.
It was a very memorable sense of progress. Like, I've got to get through this guy again. I know what to do here. It's like, oh, he's on the bird. Okay, I'll get ready to kick it.
Today game design is more forgiving about that stuff, but back then it really wasn't. So you had to really memorize, right about here is when you're going to get attacked by the eagle. Right about here is when you're going to start encountering the next tier of enemy.
Czemu to tak dziwnie przycina? Tak zupełnie bez sensu.
I don't know how many times that happened, but it was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot harder, I think, than games today. I would actually say in some ways it was a little more forgiving than a lot of games back then, because you didn't insta-die in one hit from most enemies, right? The eagle was the one who most likely to kill you for quite a while. A lot of games back then were super punitive, right? Very, very challenging. And it felt to me like Karateka, because it wanted you to feel immersed in the movie, gave you a little bit of rope, right? Not a ton.
To me, the magic of games of that era was exactly that they gave you just what you needed, and then as a player you kind of filled in the blanks, like you used your imagination, and that had a big impact on me, with Karateka, and that's something I carried with me, into Mortal Kombat, was exactly that. It's like, hey, this is an arcade game, there's not a whole lot of place to tell stories, so we better take every advantage that we can, to kind of set these things up so that the player has the tools that they need to kind of fill in blanks.
You really felt the beats of the story and the beats of the action.
To tutaj, widzisz, że znowu. Tutaj nie tylko filmiki, bo w trakcie grania też, ale myślałem, że to problem z emulacją. Ale nie, to nie jest problem z emulacją, bo,
Like I think about just the sky in that game as something that, you know,
no bo w trakcie tych filmików też to się dzieje, więc
the way the backgrounds framed you
dziwne trochę.
was very intentional feeling. It wasn't just random tree every, you know, fixed distance, right? Which again is what most of those games would have done. Tree, screen, tree, right? Instead you had a real sense of framing to it. It felt like still shots or photo shots.
And so you got a sense of you being like the protagonist, but like the antagonists are approaching you, and it takes a little while to get to them, and that cross-cutting technique just gives you a sense of tension that builds and builds and builds, and then you're facing them like, you know, it's super effective, and it was like, again, another shocking.
Fajnie, że go kopnął tutaj na tym filmiku i go nie trafił, nie wiadomo dlaczego.
Like approach.
Szkoda, że mnie zawsze trafiali.
That's like a simple thing, but it's a really powerful thing.
You had to, gosh, I'm flashing back now. You had to pay attention to where that guy was, because if it cut away to the enemy and he was coming at you from one direction, you're moving in that direction. If you kept going full tilt, odds were pretty good you'd slam right into him and get in trouble. So you actually had to remember, oh wait, he's coming. I'm going to want to slow down and give him a chance to kind of mosey in when we get close enough, right? Just to have a better tactical position. So it wasn't just that we cut away for story. It actually cued important gameplay things and gave you an opportunity to strategize a little. You really had to think about that, and
Bez przesady.
very much a learn by failing kind of process. Which of course leads all the way up to the ending, which has one of the biggest twists that way ever.
Let me tell you the story of the entire Apple II gaming community hating Jordan Mechner.
You know, the way the game worked is you essentially could be in combat stance or not. And you did move in and out of combat stance pretty regularly because you wanted to be able to sprint versus, you know, edge forward.
Finally, I have killed the boss. You run into the room and there's a princess there.
So, of course, what we did was we edged in and we got close and wham. She killed us because she thought we were one of the villains.
As frustrating as that was for me the first time I got kicked in the face by her, the chance to kind of do it all over again and figure out, okay, what did I do wrong?
If you come in a non-aggressive way, it's very different.
So you have to play the whole thing again and then walk up to her. And then she's cool, thanks for saving me and all that stuff. But the moment of shock on my face when like I was just taken out with one hit is like whoosh, you know, it's like what?
Today we'd call it a cutscene, but it's a seamless one. You were in control and then suddenly the game takes over and you're not in control, and it's perfectly seamless. If anything, my one regret with the game was always that I wanted there to be a little bit more right after that final hug. You know, it goes pretty quickly sort of into rolling the end, and I always wish there were a little more, that the story didn't just stop.
It really affected me as far as, you know, like how much of a sort of a feeling of a story experience you could have in a game, and like you could feel emotions, even, you know, being mad that something happened in the game. Like all those were like, everything was just kind of fun, and so like that led me to love like character-based games and story. I think it's one of the foundational experiences that made me want to make, you know, an Acronox, an epic RPG, or made me want to like feature more bold characters and more.
Nie, Anachronox bardzo dobry. Wiesz co, powiem ci, Adam, że tak jest. To prawda. Animacja postaci to był, no top. To był top. Jeszcze długo. Ale to tyle. Tam nic nie było więcej. O, remaster. Doszłem. Doszłem do remastera. Ale tu się z tobą zgadzam. No, animacja top. Wow. Ale ta gra naprawdę niczym wybitnym nie była. Taka typowa arcade'ówka. Idziesz w bok, lejesz wszystko, co wychodzi z prawej strony. Ty jesteś z lewej, oni są w prawej. Z prawej. I ci z prawej mają dostać. Tyle. Jak w, nie wiem, Final Fight'cie albo Cadillacach, tylko trochę wcześniej. Fear and self-concern behind you. Dobrze. O, i przecinka. Da, 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 da. O, tu jakieś wyzwania są, tak? Act 1, Act 2, bonus. Komentarz? Co za komentarz? Why do ports struggle to capture the magic of the original game? Ale tam nie było żadnego magic. Żadnej magic właściwie. Time, goals off. Scanlines. Życie. No oczywiście, że jedno. No przecież... O, można 11 mieć. Nie no. Scanlines i jeszcze chyba oprócz tego to jakaś winieta jest, bo te rogi i góra i dół są takie przyciemnione. A zobaczę jak to wygląda, a za chwilę zobaczę jak to wygląda bez tego. O, właśnie. Bo chciałem zobaczyć kontrolsy. Button 1 to punch, button 2 to kick. Button 1 i button 2. Tak po polsku i angielsku i polsku. Dziewięć hit combo? Max combo? Wow. Dobra, a te batony to które to są? Jak to nie ma tam. No dobra. Ej! Całkiem spoko to wygląda. A nie jak ten flashback w 3D. Fajnie nawiązanie, ta podłoga, to światło tak się zwęża do drzwi. Tak trochę dziwnie w sumie, bo światło to się bardziej rozszerza im dalej. Ale ta podłoga, to światło na podłodze tak fajnie nawiązuje do tej oryginalnej, do tych kresek. Próbuję się ukłonić. Jej! Ja go nogą nie dostałem, on mnie ręką dostał. A może w tym manualu będzie opisane, te ciosy będą. Biegusiem, gościu. O, tamten gdzie pobiegł? Nie w tą stronę, chłopie. On minął drzewo. Ja dobiegam do drzewa, ale to nie to drzewo. O, przycinka. Masz, masz. Tak, tak, ciak. Jak on, co on z karabinu? Ktoś jeden ruch, 3 hity. Jak wystawiał rękę w moją stronę, były 2 hity, jak zabierał w swoją, to były następne. Minąłem drzewo. Duże drzewo, on był przy małym. Mostu jeszcze nie było. O, jest most. Ej, ale nie przycinać. Ale czemu to tak przycina? Mogę go strącić z mostu? Nie mogłem? Szkoda. Fajnie by było, jakby tak z półobrotu i ciach przez barierkę. O, tutaj kopie drugą nogę, a tam nie kopał. Tam drugą nogę, jak podniosło się tą przednią nogę, bo człowiek ma przednią i tylną. To jak się podniosło tą przednią, to niskie kopnięcie nie trafiało. Oj, no co? Ale go zrespiło śmiesznie. No dobra, to jeszcze raz. A, chciałem jeszcze... A czemu tutaj, co jest? 3 razy combo. Zrobiłem. O co chodzi? Aha, bo zginąłem, to może trzeba przejść. Dobra, to... Chciałem wyłączyć scanlines. O, chciałem tak normalnie zobaczyć. Continue. Cyk. To był bokser, a nie karateka. Aha, czaję. Czyli combo może on mi przerwać, albo jak zrobię cios, który w nic nie trafi. O, można to przyspieszyć, ale fajnie. A! To przycina śmiesznie. Do, do, do. Haha. Trapuj go. No bo energię odzyskuję, chłopie. Mogli to tak jeszcze zrobić, że na przykład cios w głowę zabiera więcej HP. Albo coś. Że przycina jak oryginał. Dobra, wchodzę, bo zaraz następny przyjdzie i mi stuknie jednym ciosem. No, czego on się cofnął? No co, nie trafiłem? Przecież trafiłem. Dobra, może jakbym trafił, to by mnie nie pobił. Do domu. No idzie ten gościu, czy nie? O! Wow, chyba się muszę wycofać trochę. No on dostaje energię, a nie, tak? No, jajku, to tnie jak oryginał. Muszę zobaczyć, czemu to tak robi. Może to trzeba jakoś, nie wiem. O, ja go nie dostawałem, ale on dostał. No. Niesamowite. O, teraz się skopaliśmy nawzajem. Aha, to jak go w rękę kopnę, to też mu odbiera. Jak on cios wyprowadza i dostanie w łapę. No i nie, no gościa się nie da trafić. Tak, na kratę. Dzisiaj kratę przeszedłem w wersji na C64. No, znowu. Aj. O, już? A tu wyjdzie jeszcze następny, nie zdążę dobiec do bramy. No. Jeszcze ptaszek, ale nie, zniknął. Aj, zmaściłem. To być długie kombo. Haha. Nie mam, nie? Dobra, krata zrobiona. O! Tego nie było chyba. Drugiej kraty też nie było. O, Jeszcze co? Może niech jeszcze z tyłu mnie zaatakuje. A dobra, przebieg górą za oknem. No jasne. I co? Może mam go pokonać? Co jest? Czemu on jest tu? No dobra, ale to jak ja się nie mogłem odwrócić. Mogłem się odwrócić? Nie wiem, czy się mogłem odwrócić. Podziękuję. Dobra, manual. Every card has different headgear and a different fighting style. Nieprawda, wszyscy tak samo walczą bezsensownie. Dziwne. Nie zaliczyło mi kombosów. Przecież robiłem wiele razy. O, tutaj mi zaliczyło 3, a zrobiłem 7. Bez sensu. A no nie wiem, co to będzie można łączyć. O, cyk.
Hello, I'm Mike Micah, president of Digital Eclipse, and I'm here to talk about the remastering of Karateka.
Fajnie, przerywasz.
How do you pronounce the game? That's the fun part of this whole thing, and one of the fun parts for me going into this, listening to how everybody pronounces the game that I work with. I pronounce it, and I've always pronounced it, and you're going to hear me say this all the time, is Karateka. But then I've heard people say Karateka, Karateka, and Karateka in other ways. But Karateka is the way I've said it, and I think I've run into more people who say it like I do than any other way. But honestly, ultimately, it's up to Jordan, and Jordan pronounces it, and I might get this wrong. But
Nie, wiesz co, spoko, tylko...
How do you pronounce the game?
Aha, nie chcę. Nie, dobra, wyłącz.
Karateka is one of my favorite games.
Ale wyłączę, to szkoda ten nerwów. Muszę zobaczyć skąd te frizy. Zresztą bez sensu. O, cześć normalna. Normalna jak zwykle, wpadłeś na koniec. Za chwilę kończę. Ulubiony gierek. Współczuję. Współczuję ci, że to jest jedno z twoich ulubionych gierek z Atari. Skąd te frizy? Jak mnie denerwuje, jak ta gra frizuje. Ale wiesz co? Ostatnio był u gościa, Boże. Ostatnio u Ravena był koleś, który lubi Ninja Master, więc nic mnie w życiu nie zdziwi. O, jakie kombo mi sprzedał. O. To Ninja Master to jest dosłownie najgorsza gra, jaką miałem na Atari. Ej, no weź, ukłoniłem mu się, a on co? Aj, zepsułem. Kurczę! Mogło wejść 8. Tutaj wyjdzie jeszcze jeden, przedtem mnie zmiażdżył jednym strzałem. Tak, no jak każda, no to wiesz, to ja sobie żartuję, bo to wiesz, jak się nauczysz grać, tylko mnie to nerwowało, bo ta tutaj, no to jest responsywna, nie? Klikam lewo, prawo, no chyba, że frizy łapie, ale klikam lewo, prawo, to gość chodzi, klikam uderzenie, to gość uderza, a nie tak jak na Atari, że trzeba było tam trzymasz ten przycisk, czekasz pół godziny i zastanawiasz się, gość wyprowadzi ten cios, czy nie? O, cześć Roż. Powiem ci, że ten remaster, nawet. Tylko, że cała ta... Tak, dojszłem do ataku kota, zjadł mnie. O, kopnąłem go. Jest, udało mi się. Niesamowite. Jeszcze raz? A masz, głupi ptaku. No mogliby właśnie, mówię, że jak zobaczyłem ten remaster, to stwierdziłem, że właśnie to jest taki fajny remaster. O, będziemy się teraz kopać po nóżkach. Że to jest taki fajny remaster w stylu nieprzesadnym. Jest ładnie, jest płynnie, gra się lepiej. O, nie udało mi się. No jak czego on się tak odbija i robi ten krok do tyłu, no. W końcu. Nasz. O, znowu. Ja się cieszę, że jestem blisko typa i mogę wyprowadzać jakiś cios, a ten się cofa. O, ja nie trafiłem, on trafił. Z tej samej odległości. A! Taki ładny kombos wchodził. Haha. Teraz haha, teraz nie przebiegnę, tylko mnie zabije, jak będę przebiegał. Dobra, pani podziękujemy. O, tutaj jest właśnie atak kota. Ja nie mam pojęcia, co z tym kotem mam zrobić. No i co? Odwrócić się nie mogłem. Dobra, daruję sobie. Jutro może pogram coś więcej w to, a dzisiaj sobie już kończę. Ale jutro... Chociaż jutro... No nie, no jutro pewnie jeszcze w to pogram. Fajno, podoba mi się. Tylko nie wiem, co z tym kotem zrobić. Pewnie poszukam na necie, co tam z nim zrobić. Bo nie za bardzo cokolwiek mogę. O, wow. Ciekawe ten karateka. Platforms and Ladders Game. Ciekawie wygląda. Podobne do jednej gierki takiej. Takiej jednej, dość znanej. Schody. Jak ten, na sprężynce. It'll be great. Tak, będzie. Complex Structure. No tak. Trochę nie wyszło, że to Karateka 2, ale... Ghost Warrior. Ja do 12:30 to ja nie mogłem pospać niestety. Szkoda. Tak bym pospał. Karateka 2. The Master's Revenge. O, proszę. Full Moon in the Sky. Clear Night with Stars in the Sky. Super. Dobra. O, jest ten Karateka, ten remake z tego. Gdzieś tam, to było chyba na Xboxa 360, nie? Napisali tutaj, na co to jest? Na PC. Chyba jest na Steamie nawet, można sobie to kupić. Może to dobre, może warto byłoby sprawdzić. I dreamed of making a hit game. No to wyszło. Nawet 2 razy. No, muszę zobaczyć tamto.
So when Karateka was finally published, I was a senior in college. It was my senior year by the time it was finally published and released. And I remember for the first few months, it was kind of a letdown. It seemed like it was going to be a flop, that it wasn't going to sell well. And that was because, in retrospect, it's because in those days there was no marketing, there was no advertising for games. Yeah. Because it shipped in, I think, November or December. It just took a few months before anybody really found out that the game was out there. Word of mouth built very slowly. So I went back to school after the winter holiday, kind of thinking, well,
A tu chyba coś długiego będzie.
for a couple of years on this game, and it's good. I'm proud of it, but it's not really doing anything. It's not, it's not gonna, be a big hit or change my life in, the ways that I was dreaming of. And then slowly it kind of started to build, and I think it was in the spring that we found out that it was #1 on Billboard magazine's chart. And then the first big check arrived, and it was like, it wasn't just more than I had ever earned by my own efforts before. It was like it paid for my tuition for that year. I spent 3 or 4 years making Prince of Persia. That whole time I was living off the Karateka royalties, but Karateka made Prince of Persia possible.
Right. It's easy to care about story now because everyone has to, right? Story is, in most games, considered like a mandatory aspect. Jordan predates all of that. I think he really was one of the early pioneers of story and video games can go together and they can complement one another, and the game's more interesting because it has a story. I think he was one of the first people to really push that idea.
He was always willing to work with other people and wanted to have creative control, but he saw them more like movies. He saw it being a collection of talents, and it didn't bother him at all. I think it's obvious now that that's where everything was going. If you look at all the huge sellers now, they all have the movie metaphor. And I think Jordan not only saw that, but knew how to do that, or was willing to learn how to do that long before most others did.
Yeah, I think the big thing about Jordan first is he's multidisciplinary, and I think that's one of the things that all the top designers, when you go back and you look at who are the people who really kind of rerouted the course of video game history.
Swoją drogą to szkoda, że nie wrzucili tej wersji tego remake'u z 2012 tutaj.
Jordan's kind of a quintessential example of that, right? When you look across the kind of the history there, right? And whether you start with Karateka and you go to Prince of Persia and then forward with that franchise and his later involvement, what at each step, what each of those big leaps has done is tend to change or reorient our way of thinking about doing video games. And I think that comes because he isn't just coming at it as, oh, I can make a video game, right? He's coming at it as I can make a work, and I can bring to this work things from other disciplines, other parts of life, other craftsmanship, other skill sets. Just the fact that he documented what he was doing in the way he did is deeply unusual. That isn't the mode that most people work in. He's a super smart guy who brought to bear tools that most game devs just didn't have. And that's what led him to be able to create things that most game devs at the time couldn't make.
I didn't know who he was, I didn't know his age, but I remember at the beginning of the game, it was, a game by Jordan Mechner, came up on the screen. And so it's like, I didn't know who Jordan Mechner was, but I wanted to be like Jordan Mechner. It's like, I want to make a game. I have stories to tell, I can make pixels.
Well, what did you think of
No to ci się udało.
this time, 1980, 81, 82?
I saw it as one of the huge applications of computers. Any futurist could look ahead and see that the computer, even though it was a very primitive thing at that time, that it would revolutionize the world. Everybody saw that, but not the degree to which it did.
There was a 5-year period where Karateka was it. It was the model. And I think what's amazing about that is that, you know, the pace at which innovation was happening back then, the pace at which ideas were blooming, you know, 1 year then was like 5 years now. Right? So that means it kind of really stuck out as a precursor of everything that games would be.
I kind of expected that computer games would become important, but that wasn't influencing me in how I related to you. You know. I wasn't thinking of it as a business thing. I just thought of it as one of your passions that should be developed to the full, you know, pursued to its logical conclusion.
So you were interested in these computer games just because I was interested in them?
Yeah, oh, entirely. I mean, I had no interest in them at that time. I never played a computer game. Didn't expect that I would ever.
100 years from now.
No, ale syn chciał grę zrobić, to tata pomógł.
Of what by then will be.
Tak, to prawda. Fajna historia.
That has evolved far beyond film.
No tylko, że wiadomo,
Because it had
nie każdy mógł sobie pozwolić na spełnienie takiego marzenia. No on miał po prostu możliwość.
about people and stories.
Miał zasoby. Miał pomoc.
That video games are so popular is because of the emotions they evoke. And prior to that, prior to Jordan, so much of it was about violence or satisfaction or the tension. And this is the first game I had ever seen where somebody fell in love.
It's not that we didn't have really big swings at storytelling.
Ale wiesz, to, że miał to wszystko, no to fajnie się złożyło, że miał marzenia i miał możliwości. Bo na pewno są ludzie, którzy mieli marzenia, mieli możliwości, ale ich nie wykorzystali i marzeń nie spełnili i tak dalej. Więc w sumie... No nie można mu pomysłowości i samozaparcia i tak dalej odmówić, nie? No i także zrobił w swoim czasie najlepszą animację w grze komputerowej, no. No bo tutaj tylko o to chodzi, no. Znaczy no nie tylko, ale głównie, no.
Karateka will stand the test of time as one of the most elegant, the most cinematic, and most carefully crafted game experiences that's ever been done. It's just a jewel that still holds up to this day as one of the most classic games ever, one of the most powerful storytelling games ever, and one of the games that has a quality bar in every second and every pixel of the game. It's amazing.
Okay, I think they've gotten it. Yeah.
No to prawda, Rasz. To trochę tak jest, no. But that's another story. I to pewnie będzie... Znaczy, może będzie. Może będzie kolejna taka wspominkowa apka. No właśnie o tym mówię, że to, że miał możliwości, zamożną rodzinę, no to wiesz, wszyscy mu pomogli, cała rodzina, czy siostra, czy matka, nawet ten jakiś tam ich nauczyciel karate, no to wiesz, zaangażował sporo ludzi w to, fajnie, że mu pomogli i tak dalej, fajnie, że miał kasę, żeby sobie kupować te wszystkie rzeczy, żeby kupować tą kamerę, żeby kupić to do edycji, coś tam, to dziwne urządzenie, które tam miał, później to do przeniesienia, ten taki tablecik, no fajnie, że miał na to wszystko, ale właśnie to, że był pracowity i miał ambicje, to jest to. Bo jakby tego brakło, to wszystkie możliwości, wszystko co miał i tak dalej, no to by nie byłoby tego. Przepadłoby wszystko. Dobrze, czy ja odpalałem już wszystkie gierki, bo się idę zwijać. Death Bounce, Karateka, Star Blaster, Asteroid Blaster, Karateka, Prototype 2, Prototype 1, Prototype, Space Train, Prototype, Little Man. Co to było Little Man? A jak to wyłączyć? Bo już wiem co to jest, bez sensu. Bo to Death Bounce. Colored Balls, First Prototype. Death Bounce Rebounded, no to jest ten remake. Karateka Remaster, tutaj co jest? Karateka, Atari, Commodore i Apple II, czyli wszystko. No cóż. A ten remaster mi się podoba. Pogram sobie jeszcze w niego na 100%. Tymczasem się zwijam. I muszę zobaczyć, co z tym kotem, zanim zacznę następny raz. Bo ten kot to mnie trochę zdrażnił teraz, bo za pierwszym razem jak grałem, to 2 razy mnie zaatakował od przodu, ale nie zdążyłem zareagować, bo tam trzeba wyczuć odpowiedni moment. A dopiero za 3. razem zaatakował mnie od tyłu i kompletnie nie umiałem się odwrócić. O ile się da w ogóle, nie wiem, może tam trzeba coś innego zrobić. No właśnie nie ma. Był wspomniany, taki brzydki, różowy, paskudny, najbrzydszy ze wszystkich, ale nie ma, żeby sobie zagrać. To nie ma. Było tylko zdjęcie opakowania i parę screenów z gry. No, więc dobra, ja się zwijam. No, dzięki Adam, wzajemnie. No i w ogóle dzięki za pogawędki i towarzycho. Na razie, hej.